I have made plenty of mistakes in my career, and I've done multiple career pivots at this point. I've gone from six figures back down to starting wage, back up to six figures, and I've done it a couple times at this point. Stay tuned to find out what my top 3 lessons were coming up. Hey, I'm Sam with Systems of Impact, your place for growth minded millennials looking to find their six-figure careers. And to just dive right into things, I'd say the biggest lesson that I've learned over the course of my career has been to embrace curiosity. Curiosity has been one of those things that has really helped me propel my career much faster. And the reason I say that is because some of my biggest career jumps came as a result of my curiosity. So a recent example that I've gone through in this is this YouTube channel. As I've started going through, building out this channel, getting better on camera, trying to figure out how to do video production in the first place, and really start to go through this process, this has been originally, when it started as a curiosity, and it's over time has grown into more of an interest, and I'm starting to try to build out some of that expertise in there. But the key piece here has been that as I've gone through the video production and being on camera and going through that process, my day job as a product manager has also benefited. So for example, a lot of time I need to devote to giving presentations, giving business advice, going through and documenting and showing as to why something is the way that it is or why we should go in a particular direction. And as a result, because of the YouTube stuff over here and what started as a curiosity has directly impacted my day-to-day job. And so bridging those two gaps, and as I've talked in other videos, it's not just enough to learn about something, you also need to apply it. So in this particular case, I'm taking the YouTube stuff over here and I've been applying it in my day job, giving presentations and, today, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Teams meetings, different things like that. So getting on camera and presenting and doing it in a particular way has gotten much easier for me as a result. So from that curiosity has been some of my biggest propellants forward as I've gone through this career journey. Another actually ended up coming while I was a project manager, and some of those curiosities, I wanted to dive deeper into product management and how to build a product, how to market it, how to, more at a strategic level as opposed to a tactical level. And that curiosity, again, took me from project manager to product manager. So those curiosities from a lesson standpoint have actually propelled my career further faster than almost any other single source. So remember, curiosity turning into an interest. That piece right there is where you get to play. So make sure to indulge that curiosity. And that brings me to lesson number 2. And this one has been more difficult, but as a product manager, it's actually helped me tremendously in the overall grand scheme of things. And that has been to embrace failure. Failure is, many of us see it as a potentially terminal thing. We grow up in at least here in the United States, as we go to school and, we, pass a test or we don't get a good grade, we fail in certain expectations. The grades may end up getting hit. We're taught that you need to learn the lesson first and then apply it, when in fact it's almost the exact opposite. So in this particular case, and many times in your career, you're going to fail first and then you're going to learn the lesson. And when you're going through this process, it can be very difficult, and it can be even more difficult if you do not have a culture that allows you to make mistakes. And so this comes from more of a culture standpoint. And it's one of the core things that I look for in a company when I'm either, going to work for them or I'm going to be working with them, as a consultant as an example. And so in this particular case, embrace that failure, because the failure is going to teach you the lesson that you need to learn that can then apply towards whatever it is you're working on. So I tend to reframe failure differently, because failure is going to be the fastest path to growth. And I say that because success does have its lessons, don't get me wrong, but we tend to learn more from our failures than we do our successes. And because of that, reframing how we see a failure ends up really benefiting. So in my particular case, coming from the product world, what I started to do is I started to look at, instead of a failure, it's an experiment. Because experimentation is something that you get to go and test. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Did it kind of work? And because you're doing an experimentation, you're testing it. You're seeing if it works. Whereas a failure, just psychologically, doesn't seem like something in terms of, we see it as like a terminal thing. We didn't do well on it. And because we didn't do well, we failed at it. And, sometimes we never do it again. Especially when it comes to failure, try to reframe it as an experiment and test. Is this something I can test? Will I do well at it? And again, as you're going through that curiosity piece that I mentioned in lesson 1, when you're going through that curiosity, you are doing a lot of experimentation. You're testing a lot, because chances are when you're going into that curiosity phase and you're just starting out on something, you're going to suck at it. And because you're going to suck at it, that could be one of two things. Either one, you jumped into something and immediately failed, which, let's take for example a child. You're not going to tell a child that they failed trying to get up and walk, that they're never going to walk. That's just not how it works. But as an adult, that's typically how we see things. So curiosity leading to that experimentation. And this really frees you up to not worry whether or not you're going to do well or succeed at it. It allows you to just play and test and take a different frame of mind that is then going to set you more up for success than it is if you were just to go and hardline it and say, I didn't like it because I sucked at it. This is a different way to see things. And this brings me to lesson number 3. And this was communicate. This was probably the hardest lesson for me, even more so than the failure piece, because from a communication standpoint, I'm naturally introverted. And it took me a lot of years to learn how to be social in a way that wasn't completely and utterly draining. It still drains me, but it's not as big of a drain as it used to be. And so when I'm going and being social, that communication piece ends up taking a lot of effort. And so in the corporate world or in the work world, communication is also some of that same thing. And as a product manager, it took, and even as a project manager, I think even as much, is the communication piece is crucial. It is better to over communicate in most instances than it is to under communicate. So think in terms of more so like a soft skill. And this has really been revolutionary for me in terms of the product realm, because I didn't need this as a project manager, but I have utterly needed it as a product manager. And that was the ability to, someone's on my face. The ability to tell a story. And I'm still working on it. I'm still getting better at it. I'm even in these YouTube videos, I'm trying to, implement more stories. So it ties things together better. And as a product manager, as I've been going through some of these areas, it's like, here is a concept I want to convey. Okay, great. I can go through and I can bullet point the crap out of it and say, here's all the great stuff about it. Here's all the negatives. Here's all the risks. Here's the assessment, so on and so forth. The problem is most of my audience does not think in those same way or in those same terms. And because of that, again, you got to figure out who the audience is. And in this particular case, here's the concept I want to convey. Now I need to craft a story or a narrative around that particular thing. And so working on the storytelling skills, and again, this goes right back to point number 1, the curiosity piece, and then applying it, and then going through and really figuring this stuff out to then be able to implement it. Figuring out how to learn and tell a story. Curiosity. YouTube has been helping me with that to a certain extent. Seeing things as an experiment. What's going to work? What's not going to work? Let's test it. Let's see what happens. And then doing that over a period of time and doing it enough times, you start to get better at it. And so you'll notice that there's kind of a theme here that when it comes to your career, some of the biggest leaps forward are going to come outside of it, because there's going to be things that you're doing outside of your job that are going to directly impact your job. And in this particular case, going through and looking at those curiosities, seeing things as more of an experiment as opposed to a failure, learning how to communicate and be better at those soft skills and better communicate with those people that I'm working with. But these are things that have really, really, really helped me to not only excel at my job, but also to help others excel at their jobs. Because some of these same things you'll notice in some of these videos that I've been putting out, but you'll also see them in terms of the overall skills that you use to communicate with those around you. Sometimes these, at least for me, it was one of the harder things to learn, and it's something I'm still learning every single day. But those soft skills have been, again, one of the top things. And that's why it's the top three in terms of the overall lessons here. And that's why it is third in this overall list: curiosity, experimentation, and communication. Those three alone will help propel you much further, much faster. If you found value in today's video, make sure to hit that like button. Definitely helps the channel, and it makes sure that future videos that you also see more readily available. Bonus number 1, or lesson number 4, depending on how you want to look at things. There's a certain mentality that you'll be happy when X. Remove this kind of thinking, because it always puts your happiness in the future. It never makes it readily available. And the reason I say this, I've been digging deep into David Meltzer's content, and I'll put a link in his YouTube and his content below. But a lot of his stuff has been recently really resonating with me. And one of the things that he mentioned is that, and it's not just him, keep in mind, there's a lot of business leaders like Brendan Bashar gets into this, Tom Bilyeu gets into this, some of the mentors that I've had. But the key thing here is, don't put your happiness in the future, because I'll be happy when I get this car, or I get this house, or I get this new shiny job. That kind of thinking is really going to postpone a lot of the enjoyment and happiness that you can have in the job as it's happening, as opposed to throwing it way down the road. This is one of those things that I've mentioned before, but and I really implore that you enjoy the process. Fall in love with the journey, because that outcome that you may want is never guaranteed. Success is never guaranteed. And that's why I believe that it's crucial that you love the process. Enjoy what you're doing when you're doing it. Embrace the suck, as it were. Now, that doesn't mean don't have a goal. Goals are important. They give us something to aim for. It gives us that target. It gives us something to really go after. But don't put the happiness in the goal. What I'm saying here is that if you're always looking to the future, and you'll be happy when you get this thing, okay? What that's doing is it's robbing you of enjoying the process of what you're doing. So if you're looking at the curiosity piece and you're going and diving into something that you're curious about, for me, let's say video production in this case. Learning video production has been interesting, I would say. Figuring out how video works, getting all the gear and getting it situated in a proper way, going through and learning how to edit and produce, and to do things in a particular way that's going to not only facilitate YouTube, but give me the skills to potentially leverage in other areas of my life. And if I was going to say, I'll be happy when I get X subscribers, okay, that is a potential goal. Let's say I want 1,000 subscribers. But what that's doing is it's robbing me of the joy of what I'm currently doing. When I'm going through this, embrace the process. Enjoy the process. Again, the outcome is not guaranteed, but the process itself of either learning or potentially experimenting with something, that is. And how you perceive it is ultimately going to determine how you see things or perceive things. So enjoy the process. Embrace the suck. And that brings me to bonus number 2. And this one I think is even more crucial than the previous one, but ties directly into the curiosity piece above, as well as experimentation. And I say that because bonus number 2 is most people quit 25% of the way. However, 80% of the results come in that last mile. So in that last 10%, let's say. I'm using just rounded off numbers, but that you get the point. So most people quit before they actually start to see the results. So think of it like a hockey stick. So it's flat or slight incline, let's say. And you'll see that for most of the time. So let's say up through 80%. And then you start to see the hockey stick effect and it starts to go up. That hockey stick piece typically happens in the last 10 to 20% of the effort. And so in this particular case, let's say, for example, let's use YouTube because it's a good example. For YouTube, it takes time for the algorithm to figure out what to do with your content, what kind of content you use, who might potentially enjoy the content, so on and so forth. But most people, they typically end up quitting YouTube after like 10, 20 videos. And so what this does is it doesn't give enough time for the exponential growth. So you're still sitting here in that messy middle trying to get things to expand, and you quit right before you get your increase. And the same thing applies for things that you're getting curious about or finding interest in, because remember, curiosity leads to interest, and that interest is ultimately going to lead to the expertise, and that expertise is ultimately going to turn into mastery. So when this takes place, that is where you're talking about, is between the curiosity and the interest and the expertise. And usually around that interest point is where most people end up giving up. Not necessarily because they don't like it, but because they're not progressing at a speed that they would like. They're not going as fast as they want to. They're not getting the results as fast as they want to. So there's that old marshmallow test that they use with kids. I'd have to go look up what the actual name of it was. But essentially, they would put a kid in a room with a marshmallow and tell them if they waited until the researcher got back without eating the marshmallow, they would get a second marshmallow. The key here is the researcher would never come back, and the kid, depending on how long they could prolong their ability to not eat that particular marshmallow, instead of instantly gratifying the urge, they would see how long they could prolong that gratification. And this is kind of same kind of thinking in a way, but essentially what you're trying to do here is a lot of people jump into curiosity and start to move into that interest, but then they're not instantly seeing results. And because they're not instantly seeing those results, they quit. So when you're going from that interest piece into that mastery or that expertise level, it's that hockey stick effect. Your results are not going to come as fast as you want, and that's okay. This is, again, back to bonus number 1. Embrace the suck. Enjoy the journey. It's not that you want that thing per se. It's the process getting to that thing. So again, bonus number 1, embrace the suck. Things are just not going to happen as fast as you want, and the outcome is not guaranteed, but the journey is. Leading right into bonus number 2. Don't quit before those exponential gains have the opportunity to start to propel you forward. So as just a quick recap, we had point number 1, curiosity. Some of your biggest leaps are going to come from curiosity. They definitely did in my career. That number 2 piece is experimentation. Embrace the failure. Failure is not going to kill you. Experiment. Test, see what works, what doesn't work. And that leads me to point number 3 of my lessons, communication. Over-communicate if you have to. Learn to get good at communicating. And that alone will help you in more areas than just your professional life. Bonus number 1 or tip number 4, depending on how you want to see things, the outcome. Don't focus your happiness on the outcome. Your happiness is in the process. It's in the moments. Eckhart Tolle talks about this in The Power of Now if you want to dig even deeper into that realm. But essentially, now is all you will ever have. The future, not guaranteed. Past, already done. That's, super overgeneralization, but it gives you an idea. And that brings me to tip number 5 or bonus number 2. 25% is usually where we quit. It doesn't give us the ability to see that exponential growth. So stick things out. Even though sometimes it does suck and you're not seeing the results as fast as you want to, same thing with here in YouTube. I expected things to go much faster, but they haven't. And that's okay. Because continue to put in the work. Continue to put in that grit and to see things hit that exponential curve. And that brings me to the question of the day. I want to hear from you. In the comments below, Go ahead and put what lessons you've learned in your career that have helped propel you even further or faster, and how others can potentially leverage those same lessons to see some of those potentially same results. I appreciate you taking some time for yourself to see what some of my biggest lessons learned from my career have been, how they can potentially help you. And again, if you did find value in today's video, make sure to hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.